New York City, Soho, February. Winter twilight enveloped the city in a heavy, damp blanket. Light rain mixed with wet snowflakes, turning the narrow streets of Soho into a continuous mass of dirty gray. People wrapped in scarves and raincoats hurried along the sidewalks, trying to get to the warmth of cafes and galleries as quickly as possible. The Benedict and Gray Gallery stood out brightly among the dim streetlights and old brick facades. Large glass windows were illuminated by warm yellow light, as if promising guests refuge from the dampness outside. Today was a special occasion, the opening of a solo exhibition by young artist Daniel Moran. Inside the gallery, the atmosphere was completely different. Refined, slightly bohemian, spacious white halls, soft spotlights, quiet conversations of guests interrupted by the clinking of champagne glasses. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the faint aroma of fresh paint and varnish. Moran's paintings attracted the attention of visitors, the hyper-realistic canvases mesmerizing with their dark and sharp expressiveness. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a painting entitled Night Confession. The canvas, measuring approximately 1.5 meters, was painted in a hyper-realistic style using oil paints and a muted palette dominated by dark gray, charcoal blue, ochre, and rusty red tones. The entire image is permeated with an oppressive sense of night, elusive truth, and hidden fear. Shadow on canvas. The plot of the painting is a dark room in an old apartment building. It is an interior familiar to many. Peeling walls, old wooden furniture, a dim lamp hanging from the ceiling and casting a spot of light in the center of the canvas. The room seems abandoned, but there are traces of life. A cup of half-drunk coffee on the table, an open notebook, a coat carelessly thrown over the back of a chair. In the corner is a rocking chair with a black and white photograph in a frame, slightly tilted, as if someone had recently placed it there. The viewer's attention is involuntarily drawn to the window, which occupies the right third of the painting. Behind the glass, barely visible through the raindrops, are the shadows of two figures. They blend into the darkness of the street, but upon closer inspection, one can make out that one figure is holding the other by the neck, while the other is leaning against the wall, as if losing its balance. Both are painted with deliberate blurriness, as if the artist did not want the images to be immediately recognizable. When viewed from a certain angle, with the light shining at an angle, the painting comes to life. The reflection in the window takes on depth, and the viewer notices a third silhouette in the mirror on the wall of the room, standing in the doorway with his hands clasped behind his back. His face is hidden, but his posture betrays tension and observation. On the end of the table is an inscription, scratched as if with a fingernail. Et videbit omnia, Latin for, and he will see everything. The painting was signed in the lower corner as usual, Daniel Moran, 2025. But the layer of varnish over the signature was uneven, as if someone had tried to erase it and change their mind. The visual effect creates the illusion that you are inside the room yourself, an observer, a witness to something that should not have been seen. The longer you look, the more details emerge. Scratches on the parquet floor that look like traces of a struggle, broken glass on the floor near the wardrobe, a barely noticeable stain that looks like blood near the leg of the table. Daniel Moran himself, a withdrawn man in his mid-30s, thin, with shoulder-length wavy black hair and deep, tired eyes, clearly did not feel comfortable. He held a glass of wine in his hand, which he barely sipped, as if distrusting its taste.
You should enjoy this moment, Dan. Look how many people have come,
said his friend, photographer Edward Lynch, adjusting the old-fashioned camera around his neck and smiling.
Enjoy? This is like a circus, except instead of lions and tigers, it's me.
Daniel looked around the room nervously.
They don't care about meaning, Ed. Just that it's beautiful and shocking.
Oh, stop being so dramatic. Tonight is your night. Besides, I heard Marcus himself is here. Looks like he's interested in your paintings.
Edward raised his eyebrow slightly and nodded toward the door. At that moment, Marcus Van Dyke entered, a man whose presence was impossible to ignore. He was 57 years old, tall, slender, and discreetly elegant. His gray hair was combed back, perfectly shaven, with skin as well-groomed as an actor's. His eyes were light gray, steely, almost glassy. His face seemed immobile, but the corners of his lips betrayed an ironic weariness. Clothing: only bespoke suits, expensive but not flashy. A Patek Philippe watch and leather gloves, even indoors. Legend has it that he earned his first million by buying an old fresco at a sale, later recognized as a fragment of a lost Caravaggio painting. Since then, the name Marcus Van Dyke has become a symbol of power and mystery in the art world. He is not so much a collector as a player. He knows what to buy, when, and from whom, so that in a few years he can display the same work, with a new legend, in a museum, or sell it for 10 times the price. Marcus Van Dyke appeared at the gallery unannounced, as always. He moved slowly but with the confidence that only those who have never been refused can have. Everyone knew him, even those who pretended not to be interested in art, a billionaire, a patron of the arts, an art market shark, a collector with a reputation for being able to turn an unknown artist into an icon overnight, or bury a career with a glance. Rumor had it that his connections stretched from Swiss banks to anonymous buyers in the Middle East. He rarely appeared at vernissages, but when he did, it meant he had sensed something, and that something was usually worth millions. Walking beside him was art critic Rebecca Ford, a well-groomed brunette in her mid-40s, known for her harsh and merciless reviews. They were accompanied by 2 bodyguards who looked like they could play the roles of guests and security guards at the same time. Gallery owner Miriam Brooks, a woman in her 50s, slim, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, with a cold, almost icy gaze, immediately rushed over to the famous collector.
Marcus, it's good to see you. I really hope you enjoy our exhibition.
She said, extending her hand and smiling sweetly.
An interesting selection of works.
Van Dyke replied calmly, shaking her hand cautiously.
Especially this one.
He said, slowly approaching the painting, Night Confession.
There's something personal about it. Like an accusation, isn't it?
Mr. Moran is an unusual artist. I think he's trying to convey something important.
Meanwhile, Daniel, watching the scene from afar, turned pale and quickly finished his wine, as if to suppress his excitement. Edward noticed this with concern.
Are you okay? No, I'm not okay, Ed. I'm not okay at all.
He turned away and disappeared into the depths of the gallery. Early in the morning, Miriam Brooks went inside to prepare the hall for the day's visitors, but froze at the doorway, staring at the central wall. The painting, Night Confession, was gone. Only an empty frame remained. The security guards and surveillance cameras were of no help. The security system had been turned off for 17 minutes during the night, and no one had noticed. The gallery owner dialed the police with trembling hands. That same morning, in his studio in Chelsea, Daniel Moran was found dead. He was lying face down on the floor, surrounded by scattered brushes and paints, with a terrible wound on the back of his head, and blood caked on the floor. There was an empty light spot on the wall, where a painting had clearly been hanging recently. Trevor Kane was the first homicide detective to arrive at the scene. His arrival was not accompanied by sirens or commotion. He simply walked in, as if he knew where every shadow in the room was, before he even stepped inside. He was considered strange in the department, too quiet, too observant, too free. His superiors tolerated his solitary style, because he had a success rate others could only write about in their reports. He was in his early 40s, tall, stooped, with a tired face and stubborn wrinkles around his eyes. His black hair had long needed a haircut, but he ignored this, as much as he ignored the tie around his neck, always slightly loose, as if he had just come out of a fight. His coat was classic, dark blue, with deep pockets. One concealed a notebook, the other a folding knife and crumpled gloves. His shoes were covered with a thin film of salt and street dirt. On his left wrist, a watch, rumored to have been handed down from his father, a firefighter. He didn't flash his badge. He didn't introduce himself. He just stood in the doorway, silently surveying the place where the artist had met his death. And in that first moment, he knew this wasn't a simple murder. Someone had planned this, and he, Trevor Kane, was going to figure out what that plan was.
Was the painting here?
Yes, and judging by the position of the nails, it was taken off the wall quickly.
Trevor bent down and picked up a tiny piece of dried paint from the floor. Black, almost blending in with the floor.
The killer didn't just take the painting. He took something more, perhaps the very reason Moran was killed.
He slowly scanned the room, then headed for the door. Trevor was sure there was something deeper behind this than a simple theft or murder. And with every passing second, the case became more interesting. The rain continued to pound the roofs of New York, as if trying to wash away not only the dirt from the streets, but also the memories of the previous night. The Benedict and Gray Gallery had been transformed from a center of high society into a crime scene. While employees talked nervously with the police and security guards studied surveillance cameras in vain, Trevor Kane returned to the station, clutching a tiny piece of paint he had found on the floor of Daniel Moran's studio. Sitting at his desk covered with papers, Kane carefully examined the photos from the exhibition opening. His gaze stopped on a photo taken by Edward Lynch. In the lower right corner, the figure of Marcus Van Dyke stood out clearly, his eyes fixed on the painting. Trevor squinted, picked up a magnifying glass, and brought it closer to the photograph. Van Dyke's gaze was intense, as if he had seen something unexpected and disturbing in the image. There was a quiet knock at the office door, and rookie detective Jake Reed entered, a young, ambitious, perpetually disheveled guy who had only recently been transferred to the homicide division.
Found anything interesting, boss?
I found questions that don't have answers yet. What about Marcus?
Jake opened the folder.
Officially clean, but there are rumors. Last year, a model named Julia Rose disappeared. She was last seen at a party at Marcus's house. No clues, no charges, but a lot of talk.
Kane thought for a moment, looking at the photo from the exhibition.
Contact the photographer. I want to know who else approached the painting and how long Marcus spent near it. And call the gallery owner, Miriam Brooks. Have her explain why the cameras were turned off for exactly 17 minutes during the night.
2 hours later, Miriam Brooks was sitting across from Kane in the interrogation room. She looked impeccable, but her fingers nervously clenched her coffee mug.
I don't know why it happened, Detective. A technical glitch, probably.
Very convenient. Tell me, Miriam, was the painting sold in advance?
No, Daniel didn't want to sell it. He said it was his personal statement, something important.
More important than money?
For him, maybe. For me, no. But I couldn't insist.
What about Marcus? Why did he come?
He rarely comes and usually comes for specific things. This time, he was looking at that particular painting. I don't know why.
What was in the painting, Miriam?
A room, a window, some silhouettes. I didn't look at it closely.
Is that all?
She nodded, but Kane already knew that Miriam knew more than she was saying. An hour later, Trevor was in Edward Lynch's apartment, which was littered with cameras and photographs. The photographer was pacing nervously from side to side.
Edward, you said Moran was planning something. What exactly?
He was talking about some kind of scoop. Daniel was going to expose something important. He said the painting was evidence. And also, he was afraid of Marcus. He said he knew something about him, something dangerous.
How could he have known that?
Someone gave him a photograph, an old, blurry one. There was something terrible in it, Detective. He refused to show it to me, but he kept looking at it while he was painting.
So the painting was copied from a photograph.
Yes, he said that was the reason for its value, the truth that couldn't be denied. But then, he got scared. He became nervous and withdrawn.
When he returned home late that evening, Trevor couldn't calm down. He laid out the copies of the photographs from the exhibition and the piece of paint from the studio in front of him. Something was bothering him. He took a magnifying glass and began to study the fragment of the painting in Lynch's photograph. Looking closely, he noticed that in the background, behind the figures in the window, there was another figure, barely discernible. Kane's heart skipped a beat. The third figure standing in the doorway looked like the silhouette of a person watching what was happening. He whispered, feeling that he had stumbled upon something important.
A witness.
The next day, Trevor Kane received a short letter on official letterhead. Mr. Van Dyke will see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Please be punctual. The collector's office was located in an old building on the Upper East Side. The lobby was lined with black marble, and the silence rang like a tomb. A young assistant led Kane down a long corridor lined with originals worth more than anything he had ever owned. The study was spacious, almost ascetic. Dark wood furniture, only one canvas on the walls, turned to face the wall. Van Dyke sat in an armchair by the window, wearing an impeccably tailored suit, a book in his hands. He did not stand up when Kane entered.
Are you interested in art, Detective?
Sometimes, when it's related to murder.
Passion and violence are eternal companions of artists. Even in the Bible, the first artist took his brother's life.
And you, Marcus? Do you collect passion or violence?
I collect the truth. Only the truth is truly valuable, especially when no one else remembers it.
So you understand why someone would kill for a painting?
I understand why someone would die for what they consider art. But you, Detective, be careful. Art is a dangerous thing. It shows things that not everyone is ready to see.
Kane left the office with a heavy feeling. He hadn't gotten a single straight answer, but he understood the main thing. Marcus Van Dyke knew that he knew. Later that day, Trevor stopped at a small cafe in Queens. There, at a table by the window, Helen Rose, the mother of the missing model, was waiting for him. She was dressed simply, her fingers clenched together, her eyes burned by time and worry.
You say he's resurfaced? Marcus?
I can't say anything for sure, Mrs. Rose. But your lead could be important.
Kane said, placing a tape recorder on the table without turning it on.
Her last call was from him. She said Marcus had offered her a job, an exceptional opportunity. And then she just disappeared. No trace, no cameras, no witnesses. And the police, they said she was an adult, she could have left. As if leaving means erasing yourself from the face of the earth.
Kane pressed his lips together and nodded silently. Late that evening, returning to his home in Queens, Kane noticed something strange. His car was parked in the same spot, but there was a piece of paper neatly tucked under the windshield. No signature, no date, just one line, typed on an old typewriter. Some paintings are better left unfinished. Kane stared at the note for a long time, then folded it in half and put it in his pocket. When he entered his apartment, something was not right. The lamp in the corner of the living room was on. He was sure he hadn't left it on. On the table next to an empty glass lay his notebook, open on a blank page. He slowly walked around the rooms. There was no sign of a break-in. Not a single thing had been touched. Only a feeling of presence. A faint scent of someone's perfume that definitely hadn't been there in the morning. Kane sat down in a chair, put the gun on his knee, and exhaled slowly. Someone was playing with him, but he was going to respond, and respond harshly. Kane's thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Jake Reed's voice was alarmed.
Trevor, we just got word that photographer Edward Lynch is in the hospital. He was hit by a car near his house.
Kane jumped up, pulling on his coat and feeling the whole picture begin to take on a terrifying but clear shape. Now he was sure of one thing. Someone really wanted the painting and everything connected with it to disappear forever. But Kane wasn't going to let that happen. He already knew where to dig deeper, and he knew that the answer was much closer than it seemed at first glance. On a cold January morning, when the streets of New York were still shrouded in fog, Trevor Kane stood in the hospital corridor outside Edward Lynch's room. Edward, barely conscious after the accident, was pale, but his eyes burned with alarm. When the doctor gave him permission, Kane entered the room.
It wasn't an accident, Detective. He knows what I saw.
Trevor leaned closer.
Who is he, Marcus?
No, not him. He's an observer. She did it all. She was protecting him, the gallery, the money, his reputation.
Kane narrowed his eyes.
Miriam?
Daniel showed me a photo. It was printed out, old, smudged. He received it anonymously. A photo of Julia, the young woman who went missing. She was his model. He cared about her. He was sent a file before Julia disappeared. The photo was taken at night with a phone. It shows a scene in Marcus's penthouse. Julia is on her knees, and he has his hand at her neck. And next to them, standing in the doorway, is a woman, watching, just watching. Miriam Brooks. She saw it. She didn't stop it.
He wrote that from the photo, from the only copy.
Kane froze.
And he wanted to hang it at the exhibition?
Yes, he called it confession. He wanted everyone to see it. He had no other way. But when Miriam saw it, she realized he knew. And she realized it was the end.
Kane returned to Moran's studio. He knew he had to find the second, real canvas. Lynch's words about the face in the reflection kept spinning around in his head. After an hour of searching, he found a niche behind a cupboard, behind an old layer of wallpaper. There, between the wooden beams, was a rolled-up canvas, the real original Night Confession. He placed the painting against the wall and stared at it. In the foreground was a gloomy apartment, a window, night, rain. Behind the glass was Marcus Van Dyke, leaning over a female figure. The woman was recognizable. It was Julia Rose. The pose, the look, the despair. But the main detail was the reflection in the window pane. There, in the semi-darkness, in the doorway, stood a third figure. Sharp, clear, without blurring. It was Miriam Brooks. That same day, Kane arrived at the Benedict and Gray Gallery. He entered unannounced. Miriam came out to meet him, without makeup, tired, but still dignified.
Found anything interesting, Detective?
I did. This isn't the version that was in the exhibition. This is the original, the one Moran painted from the photograph he got from Julia Rose. It shows the scene from that night. And you, Mrs. Brooks, standing in the doorway.
That's a lie. It's fantasy. The artist could have embellished it.
The artist is dead. Julia disappeared. Edward ended up in the hospital, and all this after you saw the painting. Were you protecting Marcus or yourself?
I was protecting my life, my business, my name. The gallery was all I had. And he bought me a long time ago. Marcus gave me the gallery, invested money. In return, I turned a blind to the parties, the models, the rumors, until one of them decided to speak up. And then Daniel. I didn't go there to do that. I begged him. He refused. He said the truth was more important. That if he died, the painting would still surface. He was stupid and right. I pushed him. He fell. He didn't get up. I took the canvas. The plan was simple. Erase everything, sell the painting anonymously, destroy all traces.
And Marcus?
He didn't order it, he just waited. And once again, he got away clean.
Kane silently took out his handcuffs.
You're under arrest for the murder of Daniel Moran and concealment of evidence. Now I'm going to read you your rights.
Trevor looked at her for a few seconds. There was no malice or sympathy in his voice, only fatigue.
You understand that all I have on Marcus is circumstantial evidence. The painting, your words, no witnesses. In court, Marcus will be cleared. Again.
Are you offering a deal?
You give official testimony, on record, under oath. You link Marcus to Julia Rose. You admit that you tried to cover up what happened for him. In return, I'll ask the prosecutor to reduce your sentence. And you tell me where you left her.
Miriam was silent for a long time. Then she sat down and covered her face with her hands.
He said they'd get rid of everything. I don't know what they did. But I was there. I saw it. And I know. You can't take that away from me, Trevor. Not even if they give me 5 years instead of 20.
This is your only chance. To save something. Maybe help others.
She raised her head. Her lips were trembling.
The old factory on the East River. The South Warehouse. There was a concrete pit there. They said they took trash there at night.
Kane took a step back. The deal was done. The phone rang. An unknown number.
Congratulations, Detective. You found the killer. Bravo,
said the voice of Marcus Van Dyke.
But not the one who ordered it?
Murder is an act, Detective. I'm a collector. I collect. I observe. Sometimes I help things disappear, but I never touch them directly.
You were in the painting. You can be identified.
Who's going to decide it's me? The painting? A dead artist? A missing girl? Or you? Art is subjective, you know that.
There was no fear in Van Dyke's voice, only a slight mockery. The connection was cut. The phone was put down. Kane immediately called Jake Reed.
We have an address. South Warehouse at the old textile factory on the East River. There's a pit inside. Get the forensic team, the dogs, the whole group, immediately.
Suspect?
We won't identify him yet. But if I'm right, we just got our first real chance to get him.
2 hours later, Kane was standing at the rusty gate leading to an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The snow hadn't melted there. It lay in layers on the concrete, enveloping everything in silence. A group of forensic experts and 2 officers with dogs moved alongside him, illuminated by the dim light of portable floodlights. Miriam gave precise instructions. The south wing, the concrete pit. The place really existed. A broken fence, concrete blocks, construction debris, pieces of rails and rotten boards. When they reached the right spot, everything became clear. One of the investigators raised her hand.
The dog is signaled. There's something here.
Trevor stood at the edge of the pit. 15 minutes of digging with an excavator revealed thick plastic bags wrapped in tarpaulin and tape.
One, two, there are at least two objects here.
Reported the technician.
Open them.
When the first bag was cut open, the smell became unbearable. A woman's body was revealed, thin, with long blonde hair, dressed in an evening gown. The fabric was decayed, the remains of shoes on her feet, and a black and blue bracelet, the same one that was in the photo printed on Helen Rose's flyers. Almost immediately, they found a second piece of evidence, a cell phone wrapped in cellophane with a broken screen. It was in the third bag, deeper inside. A technician said that the data could possibly be recovered. Trevor returned to the station only in the early hours of the morning. He entered his office and sat down. In front of him lay a copy of Night Confessions. Julia's face in the window was no longer just an image. It was an officially identified body. Documents, photos, reports, all of this was now admissible in court. And that was enough. Forensic experts confirmed that death was caused by suffocation, internal hematomas, a broken hyoid bone, murder. Van Dyke's luxurious mansion on the Upper East Side was surrounded in the morning.
We have a warrant. We're going to his place.
Thanks.
No fuss, no media. Everything by the book, silence, clear commands, camera checks, the service entrance blocked, people in dark suits, armed but not hysterical, just another operation. Only the target was not ordinary. He came out himself, as if he knew, as if he was waiting. A scarf was thrown over his dark coat, the color of wet asphalt, black leather gloves, impeccably ironed trousers, and in his eyes, mockery and pity.
This is a misunderstanding, gentlemen. You know how the market works. Yesterday's art is today's sensation,
He said, looking straight at Kane.
You are under arrest. You will be read your rights.
Kane said evenly.
And the painting? Please don't let it gather dust in the basement. It's a real work of art. Even great artists don't always realize they're creating something immortal.
Kane watched as he was led down the steps, across the courtyard, past manicured trees and polished paths. Everything looked as perfect as the mask on Van Dyke's face. Only now, the mask was beginning to crack.
Now it's evidence, but you can always buy it back. Through the courts.
The photographers gathered later. The lawyers arrived earlier, but the most important thing had already happened. He had been led away in handcuffs like a common criminal. And the surveillance camera at the gate, ironically, captured his face. Still confident, cold, calm, just like in the painting. Interrogation room, Van Dyke sat calmly, as if waiting for a meeting at a club rather than being accused of complicity in murder. He looked at the two-way mirror and suddenly said,
You know, Detective, I didn't touch the alarm. Someone else did it for me. One phone call, and the gallery security suddenly lost access to the server. 17 minutes isn't much time, but it's enough to carry a painting out without making a sound. I didn't hire thieves. I just provided an opportunity. I didn't want him to be hanged. That painting was inappropriate, premature, perhaps dangerous. I gave the world a chance to reconsider. And Moran? I didn't tell anyone to touch him. Moran was hysterical. He would have burned himself for the cause. It's just, some people around me are too zealous. I give them an excuse and they go too far. That's always the case when people are afraid of losing face, rather than losing the truth.
He smiled, but there was no remorse or regret in that smile, just style. Spring came to New York almost unnoticed. The rain became softer, the air lighter. A new exhibition opened at the Benedict and Gray Gallery, renamed the Moran Art Center. The poster featured a black and white silhouette of a man in the shadows with the caption, "Art as a Witness." In memory of Daniel Moran, Kane stood against the wall, looking at that very painting. The real thing. No longer evidence, it had now become an artifact. The truth was still reflected in its glass, but now it came with a reminder. Every confession has a price. Standing next to him was Helen Rose, Julia's mother. She was holding a small bouquet of white lilies. A smile trembled on her lips, the first in many years.
Thank you, Detective. Now I can say that she didn't just disappear. That she is.
Kane nodded. He didn't know what to say. Sometimes words are unnecessary. He stepped out of the gallery into the cool evening air. Newspapers rustled under his feet, headlines screaming, "Art magnate on trial. Shadow collector may have been an accomplice to crimes." He knew it would be a long case. Van Dyke's lawyers would drag it out. But he no longer had anonymity. He had no shield, and there was a painting that had become his portrait. Kane leaned against a lamppost and looked up at the sky.
Daniel, you did it. You told the truth. The rest is my job.
The evening light was tinged with the coolness of spring. And at that moment, Kane knew that at least one name on the list of missing women had been given a complete story. And that meant it had been worth it.
The story ends here. The next one is already waiting. Subscribe to Studio 611.